Welcome to our scripture reflection for the fifth Sunday of Lent. I invite you to listen to a gospel proclamation according to John. Now, a man was ill, Lazarus, from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who had anointed Jesus' feet with perfume and dried them with her hair. It was her brother Lazarus who was ill. So the sisters sent word to Lazarus, saying, "Lord, the one whom you love is ill." And when Jesus heard this, he said, "This illness is not to end in death, but rather it is for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through him." Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was ill, he remained for 2 days in the place where he was. Then after this he said to his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." And the disciples said to him, "Rabbi, the Jews were just trying to stone you, and you want to go back there?" He said to them, "Are there not 12 hours in the day? If a man goes walking by day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of the world. But if he walks at night, he stumbles because there is no light in him." And then he said, "Our friend Lazarus is asleep, and I am going to wake him." And the disciples said, "Master, if he's asleep, then he will be saved." Jesus was talking about his death, but they thought he meant ordinary sleep. So he said to them clearly, "Lazarus is dead, and for you I am glad that I was not there, so that you may come to believe. Let us go to him." Then Thomas, called Didymus, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us also go to die with him." And when Jesus arrived at Bethany, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. The village was not far from Jerusalem, only about 2 miles, and many of the Jews had come to comfort Martha and Mary about their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, while Mary sat at home. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Yet, even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you." "Your brother will rise," Jesus told her. And she said, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." But Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, even though he die, will live, and all those who are alive and believe in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she replied. "I have come to believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, the one who is to come into the world." And when she had said this, she went and called her sister Mary secretly, saying, "The teacher is here, and he is asking for you." And when Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. For Jesus had not yet come into the village, but remained at the place where Martha had met him. And when the Jews who were in the house with Mary to comfort her saw her get up quickly and go out, they followed her, thinking that she was going to the grave to weep there. When Mary came to Jesus, she fell at his feet and said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." And when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews with her also weeping, he was deeply perturbed and disturbed. And he said to them, "Where have you laid him?" And they said, "Lord, come and see." And Jesus wept. So some of the Pharisees said, "See how he loved him?" But others said, "Could not the one who opened the eyes of the blind man have done something so that this man would not have died?" So Jesus, again perturbed, approached the tomb. It was a cave with a stone rolled across it. And Jesus said to them, "Take away the stone." And Martha, the dead man's sister, said, "Lord, by now there will be a stench, for he has been dead for 4 days." And Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they rolled away the stone. And then Jesus raised his eyes to heaven and said, Father, I thank you for hearing me. I know that you always hear me, but because of the crowd I have said this, so that they may come to believe. And then he cried out in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. And the dead man came out, tied hand and foot with burial bands, and his face wrapped in a cloth. And Jesus said to them, Untie him and let him go. Now, many of the Jews who came to Mary and saw what he had done began to believe in him. The Gospel of the Lord. I want to begin this reflection by posing what might seem like an unusual question. Have you ever wondered what a group of priests who get together for lunch talk about? Perhaps not, but I would like to share a conversation that I had with some priest friends this past Thursday. We have a group that gets together in normal times about every 6 weeks at a Mexican restaurant in Strongsville. And we usually joke that by the time we're done talking to one another, we've sufficiently depressed one another. And we joke about that. But I want to give you a little glimpse as to what our conversation was like this past Thursday. And because of the pandemic, we really have only been together 3 months ago, and there's been a long period of time between our conversations. So there was some catching up to do. So the first order of business was that we caught up on some church kind of related business. So we talked a little bit about clericalism, which Pope Francis cautions against. And we noted that the priest gathering that takes place on Tuesday of Holy Week, which used to be called an afternoon of reflection, has been renamed the Presbyteral Day of Sanctification, which certainly adds a kind of clerical cast to that event that it didn't have before. We talked about the news event about Father McWilliams, who was convicted of sexual abuse and ultimately took his own life in prison. We talked about upcoming events that were going to be happening in the diocese. We caught up about common friends that we have in the priesthood that we hadn't seen for a while. And we also commented about what it meant to be increasingly among the older clergy and what that meant. But we didn't limit our conversation to church activities and events. We also talked about things happening in our world. For example, we talked about Ukraine and the refugee crisis. We talked about the ongoing pandemic and whether or not we should get a second booster shot. We talked about climate change. We also talked about politics. One of us mentioned that there was a bill in the Ohio Congress to do away with the death penalty. We talked about how the current state of political discourse seems to be so abysmal. Looking at for example, the confirmation hearings for the Supreme Court and how there was so much theater and not a lot of substance, at least it seemed to some of us. We also noted the increase in gun violence in our country. And of course, we couldn't have a conversation that didn't include something about the Browns and Deshaun Watson. So there was much that we talked about, and by the end of the conversation, when we talked about our friendship, we said, it's good that we're back together again. We've missed each other. And we again joked that it's good to get together again and depress each other. But there was something different about the joking this time, because there was a biting truth about the conversation. We found ourselves caught up in a sense of distress and uncertainty. We wondered what was happening and what are we to do about it. We found ourselves feeling a bit of powerlessness and helplessness and caught up in something bigger than we, over which we had no control. And I only realized this after I returned, but really what was disturbing to us is we were asking ourselves the question, what does it mean to live in this place and time? And more broadly speaking, what does it mean to live at all. I think that this conversation that I had with my brother priests this past Thursday is not unlike what was happening in the gospel story that we just heard. There were some big issues that the people in the story were dealing with. There was, for example, illness, and illness leading to death. There was grief. There were relationships that were noted, and strained relationships at times. If you had been here, my brother would not have died. There was, I think, a sense of incomprehension and wondering what is happening. I think a sense of being caught up in something that was bigger than them. I think for the people in this story, they too found themselves asking, what does it mean to live in their place and time, and what does it mean to live at all? Only, unlike what happened in my conversation with my priest friends on Thursday, in this story, an answer is posed to those bigger questions. And the answer is this: recognize that you are caught up in something even bigger than the bigger thing you thought you were caught up in. And that bigger thing is the relationship between the Father and the Son. It is made explicit in this gospel story that we heard. This illness is not to end in death, but it is for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified. And then at the end of the story, when Jesus prays at the graveside, he says, Father, I thank you for having heard me. I know you always hear me, but I've said this for the sake of the crowd, that they may believe. Jesus is inviting them into this relationship that he has with his Father. And Jesus also offers a cryptic answer to the question, what does it mean to believe, when he says, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, even though he die, will live. And whoever is alive and believes in me will never die. I think Jesus is indicating to his disciples and to the people who are present in the hearing that life is certainly about breathing and hearts pumping, but it's about more than that. It's about loving, it's about relationship, it's about abandoning ourselves to the life-giving power of the Spirit, a Spirit that can raise even from the dead. So what Jesus offers to the people in this story is, yes, recognize the bigger world context in which you live, but recognize that you're caught up in something even bigger, and we dare say even better than that. And that is an answer to my priest friends and I as we pose the question, what does it mean to live? It just so happens that on the same Thursday in which I met with my priest friends, there was an experience we had at 9 o'clock Mass, which gives a glimpse of what it does mean to live in the relationship between the Father and the Son. And I'd like to describe that briefly to you. The daily Mass on this particular day included participation by children from our school from pre-K, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, roughly children between the ages of 4 and 7. And it just so happened at this particular Mass that one of these children, a second grader, whose first name is Dawson, and is preparing for baptism during the Easter season, was going to be participating in a rite called the presentation of the Lord's Prayer. And the way this works is that after the first reading, the candidate, or the elect, would be Dawson, comes forward. In this case, she was with her grandmother and with a parishioner who was kind of a co-sponsor and another student from the school who she's known for a long time. And she stood in the midst of the assembly, all these kids, maybe 80 kids and maybe 15 or 20 adults. And I explained to the children that we were going to be sharing with Dawson a great gift that God had given to his disciples, and that is the Lord's Prayer. And so I invited the children to extend their hands in a gesture of blessing, and then I began to proclaim the gospel. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus said to his disciples, when you pray, say, and I began, Our Father, who art in heaven, and the children joined in the prayer and prayed the whole gospel along with me. It was a moving and powerful event. It wasn't just I, the priest, who was handing on the Lord's Prayer to Dawson. It was the church testifying to their faith and handing that faith on to Dawson. It was the church handing on to Dawson a taste of what is the relationship between the Father and the Son. For when Jesus said, say our Father, he was indicating that we are part of that relationship. When he was saying, your will be done, he was saying, love God above all things and your neighbor as yourself. When he said, say, give us this day our daily bread, he was saying, help us to live the commandments that you give us and forgive us when we fall short. This was a powerful, powerful glimpse of what it really means to live. It means to live in the relationship between Jesus and the Father. It means to live as members of a family, as members of a church body. It means to live in a relationship of love. And it means to live that way even when so many things that seem so big in our world can weigh us down. I am grateful, very grateful for the unexpected glimpse of what eternal life looks like that those of us in that assembly experienced on Thursday, and very grateful for the attentiveness of the children to the movement of the Spirit in that assembly. They were a great gift to us. Amen. And now, as a prayer, I would like to share with you a few verses of a song that I think many of us have heard, but I want to offer this as a prayer. It's called In the Day of the Lord. In the day of the Lord, the sun will shine like the dawn of eternal day. All creation will rise to dance and sing the glory of the Lord. And on that day will justice triumph. On that day will all be free, free from want, free from fear, free to live. And then shall the nations throng together to the mountain of the Lord. They shall walk in the light of the Lord. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares. There will be an end to war, one in peace, one in love, and one in God. And on that day of Christ in glory, God will wipe away our tears, and the dead shall rise up from their graves. Oh, give us eyes to see your glory. Give us hearts to understand. Let our ears hear your voice till you come. In the day of the Lord, the sun will shine like the dawn of eternal day. All creation will rise to dance and sing the glory of the Lord. Amen.
You shall cross the barren deserts, but you shall not die of thirst. You shall wander far in safety, though you do not know the way. You shall speak your words in foreign lands, and all will understand. You shall see the face of God and live. Be not afraid. I go before you always. Come, follow me, and I will give you rest. If you pass